call this
There's
meeting
a
order
flag
at
over
12:12. We'll go ahead and move forward and we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the
flag of the
United States of America and to the republic which stands
One nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
for all.
We the people.
All right. So I guess the next, we'll start off with a roll call and see if we have quorum or not.
Adrian Trevino, George Narvaez,
Present.
Omar González Longoria, Arturo Tomás Benavides, Cristobal Rodriguez, Robert Judd Gilpin, Jose D. González,
President.
and Dr. Carlos Valle.
Present.
We have three people.
So,
Four.
with that being said, we have no quorum and this meeting is not official right now, so I guess we'll just move forward and go ahead and do, our first order of action would be recognize Elizabeth Alonso Villarreal.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth, for coming, and thank you. I know your time on the Airport Advisory Board has come to a close, and we're all saddened by that. But I think we have a little token here for appreciation for everything that you've done for us here while you were on the board, and hopefully we'll see you back soon. Sorry.
From the
I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you want to present.
First photo op and the whole opportunity.
Okay, perfect.
First meeting in person?
Liz? Yes. Well, I tell you what, it was a pleasure that whenever you're on the board, I tell you, we always leaned on you, you always had good information, and you were always very inquisitive, you know, sometimes we got a little bit quiet. You're very missed, so, and the thing about this is the first time we're actually on board, so, I mean, I was very appreciative that you were there supporting, and you're always part of our committee and very vocal as well, so I'm looking forward to you, there's an opportunity to come back. But in the meantime, take this as a token of appreciation.
Thank
on behalf of the
you.
Airport Advisory.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Yes, and yes, if I can be of any service, you know, I'm just a phone call away, but I did enjoy serving on the board. It was, you know, it's working together. It's just bringing ideas. You know.
They should get in the middle here.
Well, can we get the rest of the board
Yes,
as
the
well?
board.
You want to do it, well, I guess we got Jerry down there, so we'll do it down here. But
Yeah.
just get in front of the...
Can you please?
You want something?
Yeah, please, Mr. Narvaez as well.
Okay.
Alejandro.
But it's a pleasure. Come on, Ashley. You're always calling me.
Yeah, you're part of it. The committee, like it or not.
There you go. That's 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you for all your service.
So you can always remember.
Oh, I'm just sitting. Thank you.
Hope you come back, so there's an opportunity.
In the middle of the ticket. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Chairman, so we'll move forward here into the passenger activity report. So each one of you should have here in front of you our sheets. And we'll start here with the passenger report. You can see by the numbers, obviously, what we kind of referenced before. I know from board member Omar Gonzalez, kind of the comparison between 2021, 2020, but also 2019, which I think is more of a true respect of what we're doing. We're starting to see numbers improve. You see in April, we're seeing the plane come back actually 2% higher than where we were in 2019. And not that it's on this report yet because we don't have the official numbers yet, but I talked to TSA yesterday and we were about 1,000 passengers above where we were in 2019 for the month of May. So that's roughly about 8 to 7% higher in the month of May. So that's a good sign, starting to see that recovery. We've seen, the schedule return to normalcy with American. They're offering now for the month of June 4 flights a week. Even on Saturdays, United will be going back to their 3-flight schedule starting in July. So that's a good thing there as well. Passenger numbers on Allegiant are improving. One area with Aeromar, their flights are doing really good. We're going towards 2 extra flights a week with them on Thursdays and Saturdays. Unfortunately, the FAA downgraded the Mexican government's aviation system. It has nothing to do with the airline. It has nothing to do with Laredo. It's the actual country of Mexico. It's their version of what's the FAA, the Civil Aviation Authority there. They had some discrepancies. They do a 10-year audit. And when they did that, basically at their crux of it, they thought that there's not enough safety inspectors and that they're not paying them enough in Mexico. So as a compliance tool, they downgrade the entire country. It has happened before to Mexico. It's happened to countries like India and Israel. And when that happens, airlines, Mexican carriers can't add new service. They can only fly what was scheduled. So right now we're limited to 3 flights a week with Aeromar. So it was unfortunate timing for us. We actually flew the first week 2 flights, but because there was not a history of those flights departing, we're limited to 3. Now, the idea behind it is it's not unsafe to fly to Mexico. If it was, the FAA wouldn't allow anybody to fly to Mexico. It's a compliance tool. The unfortunate part is it really takes between the 2 governments to work that process out. From what we can understand internally, it sounds like they're moving in the right direction. The Mexican Congress has passed some different legislation to improve their overall aviation authority system, but for now it is limiting us. And the same limitations also apply to cargo operators, but we don't see probably as much of an effect there because the limitation is based on whatever they flew the previous 12 collective months and the whole national airspace system, not just to Laredo. So they still have room for growth, I think, within that, and depending on where they need to go. So we haven't seen any impact there, but it did impact our 2 new flights. And like I said, unfortunate circumstances. It has nothing to do with Aeromar or Laredo. It's just between the 2 countries. So.
Well, I know that we had a pilot program that we were established. Did it affect that in any way?
No, nope, that's still good. That's still moving forward. We should see that first shipment here at the end of June. And those, because that would fall under what we would see, the flights that were existing. And actually, it doesn't affect U.S. carriers, so it wouldn't affect UPS at all. It affects Mexican carriers. But nevertheless, if it was, let's say it was, like a TUM, if they flew 13,000 collective flights through the U.S. last year, they can fly 13,000 regardless of where it goes. So we haven't seen an impact on the cargo side, and we're not anticipating. The soonest we could probably see this get upgraded, it's they have 5 levels. It was downgraded to a level 2 from a 1. The soonest would probably be like a 6-month time frame. So we're probably tracking around December of this year time frame, or maybe November. And it's really between the 2 governments, and it depends. Really how much advancement the Civil Aviation Authority makes. But for now, we just kind of have to be in that holding pattern. We did seek out Congress inquirers' help with a potential letter to the FAA Administrator, Stephen Dixon, to ask for potential leeway in the rule, but it's pretty black and white, so I don't think it's probably going to help. But he was supportive in that, so at least we're asking, because we did have the flight scheduled. But the way the rule is written is when the FAA does a downgrade, the flights actually have to be operated. So if you can't prove that you operated a 5-flight-week schedule, you're limited to whatever you actually flew, which for us is 3 flights a week. But the Monday, Wednesday, Friday flights are looking really good. And I think the positive story there is Aeromar was committing 2 extra flights, which is great. So we were going to have a Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday schedule, and we actually flew that the first week before the downgrade, or the ruling on the extra flights came in. But hopefully see that turn around.
You mentioned that the government said that somebody's not getting paid enough?
It's the safety inspectors.
The inspectors.
From their end.
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
the civil
okay,
aviation.
okay.
So that
I get
they
it.
need to up the
Correct.
salary, and they need to hire more.
More.
There's a lot of, not saying a lot of, but there's other findings, but those were the kind of 2 major components. And I know that,
Understaffed.
yeah, right. And they've started to change a little bit, but it's, like I said, it's between the 2 governments, and we're kind of limited on information and on that
Well,
level.
over there, they have a union.
Yeah.
Everything
Everything.
Everything has a union.
Yeah.
If the union boss doesn't get paid, then
Yeah, and so I think it's really between, like I said, right now, we're trying to keep those channels open with information coming in, but the same with the downgrade. You know, we were not aware of the downgrade until it was, you know, imminent. So I'm assuming it's going to be the same in reverse when they decide to upgrade it.
question please. You said there were 3 flights from Aeromar. 3 going to Mexico and 3 coming back to Laredo?
Yes,
The road trip.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday is our schedule, and that's,
Going and coming.
yep. Yeah, so yeah, 6 total,
6 total.
arrival, 3 departure.
Plainman and plane.
Yep, yeah, and those flights are going very well. We're seeing positive numbers on those flights, and like I said, actually, such good numbers that we were seeing additional flights. It's just unfortunate the
The
downgrade
downgrading,
came the time it did.
Thank you.
On the next page, you'll see the cargo report. We're still seeing that growth from 2020 to 2021, but we're still seeing a reduction. Kind of what we spoke about last month, and the same as we see throughout the city. Reduction in cars, automotive, right, is our main component right now. And especially with the chips on back order, we're not seeing as much auto parts coming through, just because there's a high demand, there's not enough vehicles, but they don't actually have the raw material. So we think we'll see a spike once that kind of just-in-time gets online, but. The FIS operations, you know, we can see kind of the total cargo growth year over year and the activity that's happening, both from 2021, 2020, and 2019. Obviously, I mean, and it's a good point not to look at 2020 because it is very skewed to where we were this time last year. But from 2019 to 2021, we're still seeing positive, good growth in the total cargo that's using the FIS operations. And then the SAT operations, like I said, we're still one of those areas that we're looking to hopefully continue to improve upon. And I think the announcement that we had last month is a step in the right direction with UPS being a consolidated cargo in that. And the idea behind that is really that people that can't fill an entire aircraft today can use a consolidated shipper like a UPS or FedEx, and maybe they have enough material for one pallet, but they can't fill an entire plane. So the way the program works today is you have to go direct from Laredo to Mexico to be considered pre-cleared. But with this new pilot program that we hope becomes adopted through the end of summer, is you take a shipment, you put it on like a UPS, and then they use their existing logistical route structure. So a lot of times they'll go from here to San Antonio, but they'll eventually make their way to Louisville, and in this case, Louisville to Guadalajara. So that entire aircraft is still an international flight, except for whatever it was cleared here in Laredo, and they would put a seal around it. That way, when it hits the ground in Guadalajara, immigration or SAT looks at it and they say, okay, can you go on its way, and it doesn't get stuck in bonded warehousing. So I think that's something that would allow operators to utilize, you know, potential less money. They don't have to fill an entire aircraft and use an existing route structure. So I think that will be a step in the right direction to improve. You want to talk a little bit about it? Go.
Yeah, and as far as international operations.
This on
for
second page.
The second page,
Yeah.
if we move
Yeah.
on to the other page. For passenger aircraft operations at the FIS, those are basically international aircraft that are coming in that are private or air taxi. We have seen a substantial increase from last year and from 2019. So month to date, 21 to 2020, it's an increase 276% from last year. And if we compare that to 2019, it's at about 193.73% increase. So it's a substantial increase, and I think we're seeing it as well. One with the summer, like people, you know, coming in for vaccines into the U.S. for business. You know, they're reestablishing their business contacts that they had in the U.S. We're seeing a lot, especially with the borders being closed. Their mode of travel is now renting an aircraft or chartering an aircraft, that is, so they can come and conduct business in Laredo or further up north.
So one of the things we worked on with Mayor Sines is a declaration, which you probably saw on the news, for vaccine vacations, basically. You know, I think you see the numbers both on carriers like Aeromar, but also, you know, the San Antonios, the Austins of the world. The flights that are coming from Mexico they have a lot of people on them, and a lot of those people, the vaccine is not readily available in Mexico. And so when, you know, we got to a point with surplus here where people that wanted the vaccine were able to receive the vaccine, and the ones that, you know, didn't want it haven't taken it. And so, you know, when we went to Mexico City, we had a conversation with the mayor, and, you know, the idea was, we see these people doing it, and I don't want to say it was a clandestine affair, but, you know, there were rumors about CBP potentially taking passports. There were, obviously, with a situation like this in the black market, people getting charged $10,000 to get a COVID vaccine, these kind of outrageous stories, right? Because no government had said it's okay to come do this. And so people in Mexico, you know, didn't feel like maybe they were doing something wrong. And so we worked with the city attorney's office, we worked with the mayor to ask the state attorney general, who said we could do it. And so we made basically the proclamation saying that, yes, you can come to Laredo, you can get a vaccine, you can use certain channels. And then we've actually worked with the health department to put it on their website that people can actually schedule an appointment to get a vaccine through the Laredo Health Authority. We've worked with Clear Choice, which is downstairs as well, to have them get it done at the Clear Choice Hospital just north of the airport here. And a lot of people already have their own avenues of where they're going to get it. So it just turned into one of those situations that, as a government, we wanted to say, you're welcome to come do it here in Laredo. And then obviously it's twofold, right? You know, we want our friends and family in Mexico. A healthy U.S. is a healthy world. And, you know, we're so close in our partnerships here with family and friends and business that if we have a surplus and we have people that want to come to Laredo to get it, you have that human really aspect behind it, but it's also an economic impact, right? Because they're coming to Laredo.
They're gonna be using.
Right, and so I think that, you know, as a city, you know, we were one of the first. I think the first was New York and de Blasio, but it really wasn't kind of structured on what that statement was. But here, as an airport, as a community, we really said, okay, yes, come and do it, and here's the method, if you so choose to do it with us. So I think it's been successful, and that's helped, obviously, on all sides, and it's helped, because not only are we pushing that message with the airlines, but as you see in the report here, we're pushing that message with private carriers, too, that those that have the ability to rent an aircraft or a family rent an aircraft come to Laredo, because, as Elsie said, there's not the restrictions that you see in the bridge system with air travel. So moving to the next report, it's just basically kind of telling the same story about the total FIS operations, and kind of already pontificated on the point of why we're seeing kind of those increases. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing. I think, one, you know, establishes, you know, that kind of trust relationship with the community, with Mexico, but also, too, that they get to experience Laredo and maybe come back for other things that we have to offer down the road.
Yeah, total operations for both cargo and passenger are up 541.51%.
Through the FIS.
Through the
19.
FIS. That's all international operations.
We're comparing to 19, right?
Compared to 2020 and compared to 2019, it's 167.96% increase.
Like you mentioned earlier, 2020 did different channels.
Yeah, well, we did have cargo in 2020. Passenger, for sure, it was a big slow down, but cargo operations were still continuing, especially international.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I mean, definitely 2018 is a year.
The benchmark is
Yeah,
set.
The benchmark is
right,
2019
yeah.
for
But that's still a
everything.
good, a nice improvement, I mean, through the FIS, which I think shows that, you know, that as a program it's working, and then hopefully we can build upon what the SAP component of that is. On the fuel flow report, it's telling a better story as well. You know, you can see from really 2021 to 2019, we're down about $90 in the month of April, which is kind of a footnote probably, which is good. It means, you know, obviously kind of what we're seeing in the other numbers. And the more aircraft that are coming, the more fuel consumption that's happening. We are tracking, there was a oil refinery up near San Antonio that caught fire. That provides a lot of fuel towards Laredo. At the moment, there's not any operational issues, but as they start to decide how to shift fuel throughout the state, we're keeping an eye on that, because not only would it impact us, but it impacts fuel,
In the
regular
region.
fuel and the gas pumps. But we don't know the significance of damage. We just know that it's shut down at the moment, and some of our fuel does come through the San Antonio area. A lot of it is coming through Corpus, but as San Antonio goes down, now they go to Corpus, so it becomes more of a a volume situation. So as we're more limited on the San Antonio side, we're more heavy on the Corpus, but not everybody from San Antonio is shifting to Corpus. So like I said, there's no operational impacts yet. We have fuel, there's no restrictions of any kind, but we are tracking that. It just happened yesterday, so just a point of thought. But
On that note, taking into consideration the current threat on cybersecurity, are we taking precautionary measures just in case, or?
I think as a city, I know the state has really cracked down on our internal network systems. Our fuel farms, for better or worse, they're not on a network system. So we weren't impacted by the pipeline shutdown that happened, the fuel in Texas that comes through the Gulf, where we get our jet fuel from. And so what happened with the pipeline situation up in the kind of South Carolina, North Carolina area, that didn't have an impact on us directly. There were some airports northern in the region that did. I do know the city, obviously, a couple of years ago had its own version of a cyber attack, and they really, tightened down on the network restrictions. As a matter of fact, we all just got done with our training for network security. So, and the state also has further requirements now as well. So I think everything's a little bit tighter. It does make things a little bit harder because no more USBs and stuff, getting stuck in network computers, but. Yeah, I think it's obviously we can see. I mean, we've all, not that we've been impacted at the airport, but personally I've seen impacts. There's been a lot that's been getting shut down lately, and it seems like that's becoming more of the threat. But I think our local fuel farms are protected in the sense that they're not on networks or anything. It would just be the fuel that would come in from it. But beyond what happened recently, I haven't heard of any. Well, we didn't have any. I had to check on it. We didn't have any operational issues, but. For now, I think it's, at least in the near term, it's more just what happened with that fire and how soon can they get back online. And I do know I talked to the FBOs because of that. They said that we were out on the ramp yesterday. They're seeing a lot of volume come in right now, so I'm hoping that the June numbers are going to look good and the May numbers as well. And Mr. Chairman, on the last report here, it's the delinquency report. I don't know, Elsie, is there anything in particular you wanted to highlight on the delinquency report?
No, we continue to work with the different airlines. It's mostly really airlines. They're landing, and as you could tell, it's for international operations for the most part, and some domestic. So we're just seeing a delay on the activity. Some of them have less staffing on the administrative side, and they shifted from the pandemic everyone to operations, network planning and whatnot. So we get the payments, but they're more delayed than what you have in 2019, for example. So we just continue to work with them and making sure that we get as timely as possible all of our payments.
How about, I don't know if you don't have any rental cars on there, are they already up to date and everything on there?
For the most part, yeah, they've been very good.
And there was some funding that came through the FAA, part of the CRISA Act, that wasn't much, but it's around $19,000 that through the federal government that offset some of their costs as well. And we are still working on an active RFP for rental cars because we do have interest from another outside rental car company to come in downstairs. So we'll see that soon, hopefully. Do you want to give an update on the construction?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, with regards to the reconstruction of the Carway from Phase 14, we continue working. Usually during the month of May and September, that's the rainy season here in Laredo. We get delayed a little bit, but it's not hasn't been that. We're still on the 30% more or less on the status, but we continue working on that. And basically, but we're in schedule and we're on track.
Thank you.
And under general staff comments, we have the terminal unveiling event. Thank you for those that attended. We do have, I think, some giveaways that we're going to give today. It's a little plaque of what the terminal is going to look like with the extension. It's a 3D model of it.
Which is basically this model?
Yeah, only a smaller version for
but
your desk.
to scale, down to scale.
Yeah. We
Thank you.
had kind of twofold last night at City Council. We went through the process. One, we're still working on the overall contract with RS&H for the full design, and so hopefully we'll have that for the airport board next month is what we're kind of tracking for approval. And then we can really get to the nuts and bolts of the planning on it. to make the building happen. And also too, we're working on an RFP for, it's kind of, I think what we're looking twofold here, to bring a restaurant back in, whoever that may be, through an RFP process. And get that sooner than later, but something that would shift into the new space in the next couple of years. So utilize what's happening downstairs and then shift towards the north side of the airport. So we're,
Put new investment
Right.
in, facilities that are more adequate to today's needs for a traveling public.
right, and we're gonna work closely with local partners, because it could be, I mean, it's public space, so it could be any restaurant, but we're gonna see what's available, what's out there. And even, the restaurant that was in there, they're more than welcome to as well, to put in and see kind of what people are willing to do within the space. And then get that going sooner than later, and then move that into, hopefully, with the new area will be in the next couple of years. So we worked on that process, and that will be coming. We just had a meeting with the Air and Marine folks on the $28.4 million facility. The construction on that has ramped up. We're looking at a construction award in October of this year for that project. So we'll be working potentially on a shovel groundbreaking ceremony in the fall, hopefully, at some point. So coordinating those kind of dates. But that location that's on the northwest corner will be the 165,000 square foot complex for the Air and Marine operation. The ramp project itself has been moving along smoothly, really no hiccups there. We are working on phase 15 now. 14, and then moving into 15, or is that?
No, for construction it's 14.
14, okay. And then we have been working with Avco as well, so we know Avco and the 270 group for the collective projects that are happening out here, and another group that's going potentially to build a hangar, or I should say a cargo facility here on the loop that has an option on the property at the moment.
The other one, routes.
What's that?
Routes.
Oh, yes. Elsie and I will be going to Routes, not next week, but the week after. Routes is, it's kind of like speed dating with airlines. So we'll be meeting with, I think, 13 at this point airlines to talk about service in and out of Laredo. And we're working right now on individual presentations for each airline, depending on that airline, where they service, and what we think is a potential market for it. It's really the only time you can kind of get in close contact with the airlines personally. It's the first meeting that they've had in over a year. With COVID, a lot of the airlines have started to do some unorthodox things. We've seen a lot of different services start, which is good, but it's kind of different from the norm. So we're hoping to see, maybe capitalize on some of what the changes that they made. Something like Southwest in particular, the conversation before COVID was capacity constraint, right? There wasn't enough planes, there wasn't enough pilots. And so on average, they opened about 2 new airports a year. Last year, they opened 17 because, everything kind of went south. If you look at our reports, like I said, this last month, we're actually about 1,000 passengers more than where we were. So we're sitting about like 7 or 8% higher than normal. But there's still a lot of airports out there that are 50, 60% down, just depending on what their market base is. We've seen a lot of tourist destinations come up with the airlines. That's a lot of where people have been willing to travel. But now business is starting to come back. So I think we have a good case. We've been seeing very high numbers with American in particular, as we were going over the data, about a 90% load factor, meaning 90% of the plane had people on it, which historically at this airport we've sat around about 65% roughly, which was a good and bad story. 65% was good for them at the price tickets that they were giving, so they were content with it, but it was a hard story for us to add capacity because we still have a plane that has 35% of empty seats. So they were happy with their flight. There wasn't a risk of the flight going away, but it made the conversation hard when it started talking about new service. But now that we've seen that shift a little bit, I think that helps us as a community. And our leakage rate to San Antonio typically sits about 75 to 79%, basically meaning 79% of the people in Laredo that fly go to San Antonio, right? Mm-hmm. And so our biggest carrier is Southwest out of San Antonio. More people fly on Southwest out of San Antonio than they fly out of here on our existing carriers. But over the last 6 months, we've seen that start to dip down to about 69%. So we're taking about 10% of those passengers back out of here. I think there's multiple factors. We've all done the price comparison calculator they have on the website now, which I think is a tool that the community can use that gives them the true cost between flying from Laredo or flying from San Antonio or Austin. But there's also the other component that, with COVID, with pandemic, flying maybe more local, having less time in that security checkpoint. I think there's some, different avenues and anomalies that are happening there. But, we're capitalizing on some of that and bringing those people back into the Laredo market and actually get to use, I think, us they haven't seen before. So, we're seeing that at least move in the right direction. I know there was a recommendation for pins for board members, and Ashley is working on with the vendor for the city that makes our pins, and they'll send a design out to the board members to see if you approve the design, you like the design, and then we can go ahead and
Better get a
purchase the
sport
order.
coat.
Yes, and a sports coat. Yes,
I
the master's sports coat.
well, the thing is, I gave away all my ties and all my shirts.
We can put it on your lapel there. It's okay.
Yeah, right.
Hawaiian look.
Well, the thing is, I was wearing T-shirts for like 7 years, and then just last week I started buying something like this.
You gotta get the wire vet in there.
And then, yeah, right.
Is there anything you wanted to? I think unless
Well, a
there's
couple of questions about
Yes.
it right now that you made reference to, and one of them is, in regard to the RFQ?
RFP.
RFP request for the
Proposal.
restaurants, are you gonna start trying to see if you can generate interest with a national chain?
I think, yeah, that,
Both, yeah.
both. It's, obviously, there's two different travelers, right? There's the person that wants what they know, and they don't have to kind of guess on what it is, and then there's somebody that wants the authentic
Yeah.
experience, right? And so, I think it's collective when you look at the new square footage, which is gonna be about, I think, 28,000 square feet, and then not only that space, but we're gonna have, I think, multiple concession locations. And so there's the kind of the immediate need to develop a space and then expand from there, and then hopefully some different locations that allow that traveler that kind of both experiences, hopefully, of what they're looking to get, maybe something that's more mainstream, but then potentially.
Familiar.
Right. But yes, it would, and I think really, to see what we potentially could get back. And a lot of when you put a proposal together like that is, what's your foot traffic based off of employments? Where are they at? How much dwell time is there? And so as we start to put those together, I think that we'll see a potential situation where hopefully we can have something to choose from, whether that's a national brand or something that's more local.
Yeah, and we have a consultant who's part
Unison.
of the team, Unison and RSNH, who, like Jeff mentioned, has just been awarded the contract. So they're gonna be conducting that study. And then also, they are gonna be having meetings with our local restaurant concessionaires in the area. And then put those two together, like the national, regional, and local, different concessionaires that would be available. And then see what's also their appetite, if you will, for operating at our airport.
I think where we really struggled before was presentation. I don't think it was what people expected in an airport venue, and I think that there was that expectation, but there's also contractual items in there to be here when there are departures. Be here for that 6 a.m. flight, that 7 a.m. flight, so the person going out doesn't have to go out with an empty stomach. Or, TSA obviously has their rules about liquids, and so, if you're coming through, if you have medication, especially when we started seeing, with COVID, and the airlines start to restrict a little bit of in-flight service, which they're starting to go back now to normal. But, we worked to get the vending machines in here with credit cards, which we have now, which have been a huge help. Because before, with the vending that we had, it was quarters or
Coins,
dollars.
yeah.
Yeah, and most people don't travel with that type of currency anymore. And so that's been a help. But, as we start to track back now, I think really what we're trying to focus on is to give those flyers, whether local or national, that it's got that curb appeal and the aesthetics, that it's a place that you want to sit, that you want to have something to eat, something to drink. And, really kind of up that experience
At the
maybe
international
before,
level. Mhm.
right, before, I don't think we were there. And I think that's where we struggled, and a lot of the complaints that we got were really based, not so much around the food itself, but just around the presentation of the facility. And I think regardless of where the RFP leads us, that's where we would hope to have those expectations with whoever it may be that would operate the restaurant, whether national or local, that there's that attention given to what the aesthetics are of the facility. And, you know, because that all kind of goes hand in hand of, is the food good, are the aesthetics good, is the cleanliness there? Because if you see something that doesn't look like it fits in an airport, then you start to question, I think, the rest of it. And that's really where we started, especially with the business travelers having issues with getting to that point of satisfying the needs.
The second thing is, well, I said three. Second thing is, I think we're missing out on a huge opportunity for marketing, especially like you go to all the other airports, you always have, like Houston has their thing, Dallas has their thing, Laredo has nothing, you know, so we could sit there, those stores sell marketing, Laredo, you know, the South, the little flair stuff, so.
Yeah.
Have the
That's,
stores
yeah,
also.
and
Yeah.
that's part of the concession.
And I agree, you know, we actually, even with Visit Laredo, even internally, they have an interesting, a nice little shop down at the new visitor center, down by the International Bridge. And they sell a lot of the Laredo themed items. You know, people expect if you forget to buy your wife or your husband
As they're going
something,
out,
right?
it's always the last
grab
thing they
something.
see.
souvenir,
Yeah, it's an
right.
opportunity, yeah.
Yeah.
Soccer
Right.
jerseys.
Like a little gift shop,
Yeah.
newsstand, grab and goes.
Right.
So that's all part of the concession,
Right.
project that we're trying to do.
You don't really need a study, man, that's just an opportunity that's being.
Absolutely.
The hard thing with us is staffing versus volume, and that's really where we struggle, I think, a little bit with that. You know, we
The
talked-
flights are spaced.
Right.
There's those empty times.
And so we've talked about potential investment, either direct from us or potential vendor into maybe something that's more of a digital footprint that allows, you know, someone to come in and purchase an item without having an actual individual there. And I think that's really where the study can get us to the point of saying, okay, here's where we think to sell somebody to say, yeah, put that staff member there, or invest in the technology. Because that's, I think, more of the uphill battle is trying to get those individuals to understand the need. Because I agree that, you know, there's definitely a market for people to get something. Because a lot of times what we see, especially with the business traveler, is they come to Laredo, they go to their meeting, they come back to the airport, and they leave, and they never really get to experience the community. So we do want to kind of create that sense of place here, where maybe they can see a little bit of the community in the terminal if they didn't get the opportunity to do it outside of the facility, and maybe, you know, pick something up on the way back, and then hopefully commit to come back for an actual trip, or a longer trip.
And the last thing would be the regional carriers. It seems like you're already dealing with Southwest. Hopefully we can kind of find an appeal like we do with the Mexican carriers, so you can really focus on that regional carrier locally, because we need that, you know, so.
Yeah,
and then
you know-
If we're going to San Antonio, it's just a lost opportunity for us, you know.
Right, I think the hard thing with like a San Antonio market is you start talking resources, right? So when you see those small hops that happen like a San Antonio, most of those markets are small like that are essential air service, and the Laredo Airport wouldn't fall into that category. It's airports that can't maintain their own commercial service, and so the federal government subsidizes. And there's a whole bunch of rules about who can be considered that. There's a few airports, and I worked at one of them at the beginning of my career, that fall into that category. But what happens with the business model around a regional like that is you're not probably, I mean, there are some startups, so there's potential conversation, but realistically, where I would see us probably leading towards is more like an Austin, just by the distance, because you start talking about profit margins for these carriers, aircraft size and distance, and that leap there is kind of hard. I know, you know, just people see the San Antonio, but they see it because they want the lower fare. So I think we're trying to get people to understand the drive versus the fare and the true cost of, you know, what you're going to pay. If you're going to get a ride from your friend and you're not going to park, then yeah, San Antonio is probably your better bet. But if it's a true calculator to show that, because I do, you know, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer on the San Antonio situation, but I do think just the way that the airlines are developed today, it's a harder stretch to make a route like that work, just because of the proximity between the two facilities, and to make it where it would be attractive to someone to actually use that carrier, because there's not this abundance of what's considered 121 operators that can go into one, like a commercial airport like this, like through TSA, and then go to another airport and have those interline agreements where if you flew from here to San Antonio and you went in the terminal and you were connecting, you know, on like a United, that those would be things that would take a long time, I think, to establish, but then also with an aircraft type like that, to make it a price point where people would find it attractive and not still drive from here to San Antonio. But the further distance you get, the more, I think, appealing you can make kind of those arguments, and I think that there can be, with some of the carriers we're talking to, a potential argument for like in Austin. You know, it's just the way the hub and spoke system has designed in the U.S. since the deregulation in 1978, it's based around volume, right? Take individuals from a Laredo, a San Angelo, a Corpus Christi, dump them into a Dallas, and then have the volume to send from there. And so I think there are some avenues for maybe a regional aspect. I don't know if San Antonio is probably that right, a realistic market with some of the carriers, just because it is, and I get asked it all the time. And you know, obviously we would always be open to have conversations with people, but it doesn't, I think realistically it probably would have to be further out for us to make that appealing to an operator, and also to the passengers, that would make sense for them. Because a route like a San Antonio too, San Antonio is big compared to us, but they're not big compared to Dallas and Houston,
No.
right? So you can't get everywhere you need to go at a San Antonio.
They're limited in San Antonio.
Yeah, so you start talking about connection points from there as well. So that's how a hub and spoke system works, where you start talking about like an IAH or DFW, and you get those more robust connection points, and it makes those a little more, I think, appealing for the airlines, because now they can, you know, okay, one stop, you get to all these areas. You know, especially when we start talking international, it's a little more limited, but it's, I mean, point well taken, and we're definitely working with, I think, different avenues. Each airline, we craft a little bit different message too of what we think based off the data that we have, because we get really good data, who's flying from Laredo and where they're going, on their existing route structures and what we think could potentially make sense for them in a Laredo market.
Thanks, sir. This was almost covered our hours, so.
Sorry about that, yes.
Just remind-
That's all the items, Mr. Chairman. that
Yeah,
we
well, it's an informal meeting anyway, so
Yeah.
it's good information, that's all.
And I know we talked briefly about it. Ashley's going to take some of the attendance and send it along to not only city secretary, but to the council member assistants, because with our new rule, everybody here does get an absence that's not here. So, you know, we're getting to the point with some, I think, members where they'll be restricted, not only from, the way the rule works is if you miss 4 on any of your boards, then you can't be on anything until that member on city council's term is up. And so I really don't want to find ourselves in a position, because we are getting some close with some members now, right off the bat for attendance. And so the rule is pretty strict from city council. And so we'll pass those messages along to make sure that nobody is surprised. Nobody's off yet, but it's getting close.
Well, listening to what Liz was here earlier, she made a comment, and maybe, you know, we could sit there accommodate a little bit better by, you know, changing it just in the time. That'd be more convenient for some of the individuals on the board, so.
Yeah, maybe
We could look into that, so.
we could ask, and to Chairman's point, maybe send an email out to see if there's something that works better. I know city has said no more virtual unless there's a special accommodation, and I think we have to record down what that special accommodation would be. But for now, it has to be, well, moving forward, unless something else changes, it's in person. But maybe shifting the day or the time, maybe that's what's an issue for people. I think we could ask. I'm happy to do that.
And even so, you know, maybe move forward and just in the meantime do hybrid for the next 3 or 4 months, just until we can sit there, move forward.
Yeah, I don't know if we can make a request to city secretary. I don't know if the last statement we got was no hybrids, but we can always ask again. I just know it's
Just
kind of a.
throwing things out.
Yeah,
Because we got participation, we just hopefully can get them to be
Right,
involved.
right, yeah. No, I think, you know, the digital helped us to meet that quorum for sure. And I know a lot of people liked it. I think it's just something the city, from city council directive, is to not have it, sorry.
I'm sorry, question. Has the vice chair been notified of the vice chair position?
We have. and he accepted.
Oh, okay. So I
But
thought
he just
maybe.
hasn't shown up.
No, I thought maybe because you didn't know.
That's when you get, that's how it not, you get elected, you get appointed.
Yes,
Yeah, that's why you need to show up.
yes. So, okay, thank you.
Conclude.
Meeting concluded.